Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to challenge a common notion that's become so embedded in our culture that we barely question it anymore. We're told, especially women, that being nice is the path to harmony, the secret to building relationships, and the cornerstone of a good life. But what if I told you that being nice isn't the solution? And worse, it might even be part of the problem? What if being nice to men in particular is a subtle trap that harms not only you but the very men you're trying to connect with? Now, before you dismiss this as radical or confrontational, I want you to stay with me, because what I'm offering isn't hostility, it's clarity. This isn't about being unkind, it's about being real, honest, and strong. By the time we're done here, you'll understand why abandoning superficial niceness is not only liberating for you, but transformative for the men in your life. You'll leave this conversation equipped with the tools to foster relationships built on respect, strength, and truth. Let's dive in. Being nice is often celebrated as a virtue, especially in our modern, highly socialized world. It's the trait we're taught to display when we want to be liked, when we're eager to avoid conflict, or when we aim to be perceived as cooperative and agreeable. Niceness on the surface seems like an obvious good. It keeps the peace, softens interactions, and creates a pleasant environment. But beneath this glossy exterior lies a dangerous pitfall. Niceness, when overemphasized, often leads to self-betrayal, resentment, and relationships built on shaky foundations. When we talk about being nice, what do we mean? We usually mean going along with what others want, suppressing dissent, and avoiding behaviors that might rock the boat. At its core, niceness is often about pleasing others, and it frequently comes at the expense of being authentic. For many, especially women, this niceness is a deeply ingrained habit, a survival strategy developed in environments where being assertive or disagreeable might have led to social rejection or worse. While this tendency can help in certain situations, it becomes toxic when it's the default mode of interaction. Here's the problem: niceness doesn't equal goodness, integrity, or strength. It's not the same as kindness or compassion, which are rooted in genuine concern for others. Niceness, in contrast, is often a performance. It's a facade we put on to win approval, to avoid confrontation, or to make ourselves more palatable. And like all performances, it's unsustainable in the long term. Over time, it erodes the very relationships it's supposed to enhance. When you're too focused on being nice, you're likely to overlook your own needs and values. You say yes when you mean no. You suppress your true feelings to maintain harmony. You accept behavior that crosses your boundaries because addressing it might be rude. And while this may seem harmless in the moment, it builds up inside you a quiet, growing resentment that poisons your interactions and eats away at your self-respect. Niceness, particularly in relationships with men, can also have unintended consequences for the other person. When you're too accommodating or eager to please, you're not giving the other person an honest reflection of themselves or their behavior. Instead, you're enabling a dynamic where their flaws and shortcomings go unchecked. You're sending the message that they can act without accountability, that their comfort is more important than your truth, and that the relationship is based on compliance rather than mutual respect. What's even more insidious is that this niceness can breed contempt. Human beings, whether consciously or subconsciously, value what they must work for. Relationships where one person is perpetually nice, never challenging, never standing firm, never expressing authentic emotions can come to feel one-sided and shallow. The other party may begin to take the niceness for granted, interpreting it as weakness or lack of self-worth. And once that perception sets in, respect erodes. This pitfall is particularly pronounced in romantic relationships where being overly nice can lead to imbalances of power. When you prioritize someone else's happiness to the exclusion of your own, you diminish your voice in the partnership. Your opinions carry less weight, your desires take a back seat, and the relationship starts revolving around one person's needs instead of two. And the tragedy is that this imbalance doesn't just hurt you, it stunts the other person's growth as well. Niceness can also create a vicious cycle of emotional dishonesty. Imagine a situation where you're bothered by something a man in your life has done, a thoughtless comment, a broken promise, or a recurring habit that grates on you. But instead of addressing it, you brush it off with a smile, telling yourself it's not worth the trouble. Over time, these unspoken grievances pile up, creating a gulf between your true feelings and the persona you present. And the other person, blissfully unaware of this growing divide, continues to act as they always have, oblivious to the harm they're causing or the ways they could improve. Perhaps the greatest danger of niceness is the way it distorts your own sense of self. When you're too focused on pleasing others, you lose touch with your authentic self. You stop asking important questions. What do I truly want? What do I value? What am I willing to stand up for? Instead, your energy is consumed by trying to fit into someone else's expectations. And when you lose that connection to your core identity, you become vulnerable to manipulation, exploitation, and a profound sense of dissatisfaction. Niceness isn't about strength, it's about avoidance. It's a way of sidestepping conflict, discomfort, and vulnerability. But true connection, whether with men, women, or anyone else, requires more than that. It requires honesty, courage, and the willingness to confront difficult truths. Because without those elements, niceness is just a mask, and masks, no matter how convincing, always slip eventually. Respect and validation often seem like they belong in the same category. Many people confuse the two, assuming that to respect someone, you must validate their every feeling, opinion, and action. But this misunderstanding can lead to profoundly dysfunctional relationships. Respect and validation are fundamentally different, and understanding the distinction between them is critical if you want to engage with others, especially men, in ways that are constructive, authentic, and meaningful. Validation is the act of affirming someone's feelings or behaviors, often without question or critique. It can feel good in the moment because it provides immediate reassurance and comfort. When you validate someone, you're essentially saying you're fine just as you are. You don't need to change or improve. This is not inherently wrong. There are certainly moments when people need that kind of support. But when validation is given unconditionally and without discernment, it can become a trap. It tells the other person that their current state is sufficient, even when it might not be. It can encourage complacency rather than growth, and in relationships, it can lead to a dynamic where one person is continually propped up at the expense of honesty and progress. Respect, on the other hand, is a deeper and more enduring concept. It involves recognizing the other person's inherent value as a human being while simultaneously holding them accountable to standards of behavior and responsibility. Respect is not about blanket approval, it's about seeing someone's potential and treating them in a way that encourages them to rise to it. Unlike validation, which often prioritizes immediate emotional comfort, respect prioritizes long-term growth and integrity. In relationships, particularly those between women and men, this distinction becomes crucial. Many people fall into the habit of offering constant validation in an effort to maintain peace or build connection. They might think, if I make him feel good about himself, he'll be happier, and the relationship will flourish, but this strategy often backfires. While validation might provide a temporary sense of closeness, it doesn't foster the mutual respect that sustains healthy relationships over time. When you validate without respecting, you inadvertently create a power imbalance. You position yourself as someone who exists to affirm the other person's identity rather than challenge or complement it. Over time, this can lead to feelings of resentment and dissatisfaction, as your needs and boundaries take a back seat to the other person's desire for reassurance. Worse, it can lead the other person to take your validation for granted, interpreting it as a lack of conviction or self-respect on your part. Respect requires something more profound. It demands that you see the other person not as they are in their current state, but as they could be. Respect means holding space for their potential while being honest about their shortcomings. It means refusing to excuse bad behavior or tolerate actions that conflict with your values. When you respect someone, you challenge them not out of hostility, but out of a belief that they are capable of more. One of the key differences between respect and validation is the willingness to say no. Validation often involves going along with someone else's desires or feelings, even when they conflict with your own. Respect, however, means having the courage to set boundaries and stand firm in your principles. It's the ability to say, I care about you, but I won't condone this behavior, or I value our relationship, but I can't agree with this decision. These moments of honesty can be uncomfortable, but they're essential for building relationships that are grounded in mutual trust and authenticity. It's also worth noting that respect and validation aren't mutually exclusive. There are times when validation is appropriate and necessary, especially when someone is struggling and needs reassurance to find their footing. But true respect ensures that validation is balanced with honesty. It doesn't allow validation to become a crutch or an excuse for avoiding hard conversations. When you respect someone, you're not afraid to confront the truth, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. You're willing to point out inconsistencies or challenge behaviors that don't align with their stated values or goals. And while this might create tension in the short term, it lays the foundation for deeper trust and understanding. When someone knows that you respect them, they're more likely to take your feedback seriously because they understand that your intentions are rooted in care and a genuine desire to see them thrive. And respect also fosters equality. When you engage with someone on the basis of respect, you're treating them as an equal partner in the relationship. You're not positioning yourself as superior or inferior, but as someone who recognizes their worth and expects the same recognition in return. This equality creates a dynamic where both people are empowered to grow and contribute to the relationship in meaningful ways. The problem with excessive validation is that it often disguises itself as kindness. You might think you're doing the right thing by agreeing with someone or avoiding criticism, but in reality, you're denying them the opportunity to grow. Respect, by contrast, is an act of courage. It requires you to put aside the fear of conflict and engage with the other person in a way that's honest, challenging, and ultimately transformative. Understanding the difference between respect and validation is not just important for your relationships with others, it's essential for your relationship with yourself. When you prioritize respect, you're not just demanding more from the people around you, you're demanding more from yourself. You're committing to honesty, integrity, and a willingness to engage with the world in a way that's real and meaningful. Accountability is the cornerstone of any meaningful relationship, whether it's between friends, family members, colleagues, or romantic partners. It is the process of taking responsibility for one's actions, acknowledging mistakes, and making a genuine effort to improve. In the context of relationships with men, accountability plays a critical role because it ensures that both parties contribute equally to the dynamic. Without accountability, relationships become lopsided, unfulfilling, and often toxic. One of the reasons accountability is so essential is that it forces clarity into the relationship. When a person is held accountable for their words and actions, there is no room for ambiguity or excuses. They must confront the consequences of their choices, and in doing so, they are given the opportunity to grow. This process isn't easy. It can be deeply uncomfortable to admit fault or face criticism, but it is necessary for the development of character and integrity. Accountability is the antidote to complacency, pushing people to strive for something better than their current state. When it comes to men, accountability is particularly important because societal norms have often allowed them to evade it. In many cultures, men are encouraged to be assertive and independent, but not necessarily introspective or self-critical. As a result, some men grow up without developing the tools to take responsibility for their actions, especially in the emotional and relational aspects of their lives. They may be conditioned to believe that their intentions matter more than the impact of their behavior, or that their feelings of discomfort or frustration justify certain actions. This lack of accountability not only hinders their personal growth, but also creates unnecessary strain on their relationships. In many cases, women unintentionally enable this lack of accountability. Out of a desire to keep the peace, avoid conflict, or maintain a positive image of the relationship, they may excuse or overlook behavior that should be addressed. For example, they might rationalize repeated lateness as forgetfulness, dismiss inconsiderate comments as jokes, or tolerate neglectful behavior because he's just stressed. While these justifications may seem harmless in the moment, they set a dangerous precedent that the man's actions have no real consequences. But accountability isn't about punishment or shame, it's about growth. Holding someone accountable doesn't mean belittling them or constantly pointing out their faults. It means fostering an environment where mistakes can be acknowledged and corrected. It means saying, "This behavior is not acceptable, and I expect better from you not because I want to control you, but because I believe you are capable of more." When accountability is approached with empathy and a belief in the other person's potential, it becomes a tool for empowerment rather than a source of conflict. Accountability is also a two-way street. If you want the men in your life to take responsibility for their actions, you must be willing to do the same. This means being honest about your own mistakes, apologizing when necessary, and demonstrating the same commitment to growth that you expect from them. When you model accountability, you set the tone for the relationship, showing that responsibility is not a burden but a virtue. This creates a dynamic of mutual respect and trust, where both parties feel valued and heard. A key aspect of accountability is setting boundaries. Without clear boundaries, it becomes impossible to hold someone accountable because they don't know where the line is drawn. Boundaries are not about controlling the other person, they're about defining what is and isn't acceptable to you. For instance, if a man in your life frequently cancels plans at the last minute, you might set a boundary by saying, "I need you to be more considerate of my time. If you can't commit to plans, I need to know in advance." By setting this boundary, you're making it clear that his actions have consequences and that you expect him to take your needs seriously. Another important component of accountability is communication. People cannot be held accountable for expectations they don't understand. If you want to encourage accountability, you must be willing to express your needs and concerns clearly and directly. This requires courage and vulnerability, but it's the only way to create a foundation of honesty and respect. For example, instead of letting resentment build over a pattern of dismissive behavior, you might say, "When you interrupt me during conversations, it makes me feel like my thoughts don't matter. I need you to listen more attentively." This kind of communication invites the other person to reflect on their behavior and make meaningful changes. Accountability also involves consistency. It's not enough to address an issue once and then let it slide the next time it happens. Consistency shows that you take your own boundaries and values seriously, and it reinforces the idea that accountability is not optional. At the same time, it's important to recognize and celebrate progress. When someone makes a genuine effort to change, acknowledging their growth can be incredibly motivating. It reinforces the idea that accountability leads to positive outcomes, strengthening the relationship in the process. In relationships with men, accountability can be a transformative force. It challenges the other person to become more self-aware, responsible, and empathetic. It encourages them to move beyond defensive reactions and take an honest look at their actions and their impact on others. By fostering accountability, you're not just improving the dynamic of the relationship, you're helping the other person become a better version of themselves. Assertiveness is often misunderstood. It is sometimes mistaken for aggression or dominance, traits that many people shy away from embodying for fear of seeming confrontational or overly harsh. But true assertiveness is neither aggressive nor domineering. It is a balanced expression of one's values, needs, and boundaries communicated with clarity and respect. Assertiveness is a strength, not because it imposes control over others, but because it is rooted in self-respect and fosters mutual understanding. When you are assertive, you are saying to the world, "I know who I am, I know what I stand for, and I'm willing to communicate that openly." This clarity is essential, particularly in relationships with men, where miscommunication or avoidance of difficult topics can often lead to resentment or imbalance. Assertiveness is the mechanism by which you can ensure your voice is heard, your needs are respected, and your individuality remains intact. Assertiveness begins with self-awareness. To be assertive, you must first know what you value, what you need, and where your boundaries lie. This requires reflection and honesty with yourself. Many people struggle with assertiveness because they lack this internal clarity. They haven't taken the time to define their own standards or understand their own priorities. As a result, they default to either passive compliance or aggressive demands, neither of which fosters healthy relationships. For women especially, cultural conditioning often discourages assertiveness. From a young age, many are taught to prioritize harmony over honesty, to avoid being difficult, and to suppress their desires in favor of accommodating others. This conditioning can lead to a lifelong pattern of passivity, where one's own needs are ignored or minimized for the sake of keeping the peace. But this peace is an illusion. It comes at the cost of authenticity and ultimately at the cost of genuine connection. Assertiveness is the tool that breaks this cycle. One of the key strengths of assertiveness is its ability to establish clear boundaries. Boundaries are not about creating distance or shutting people out. They are about defining the terms of healthy interaction. When you set a boundary, you're saying, this is where I end and you begin. This is what I need to feel respected and safe. Assertiveness gives you the courage to articulate these boundaries without guilt or apology. For example, if a man in your life habitually interrupts you during conversations, an assertive response might be, I value our discussions, but I need you to let me finish my thoughts before jumping in. This statement is firm but respectful, addressing the issue without hostility. Assertiveness also enhances mutual respect. When you assert yourself, you're not just standing up for your own needs, you're inviting the other person to do the same. You're creating a dynamic where both parties can express themselves honestly without fear of judgment or reprisal. This mutual respect is the foundation of any strong relationship. It ensures that both individuals feel valued and heard, even when disagreements arise. Critically, assertiveness helps prevent the buildup of resentment. When you suppress your feelings or fail to address issues as they arise, those unspoken grievances don't disappear, they linger beneath the surface, growing into resentment over time. Assertiveness allows you to address problems directly before they become unmanageable. It creates an environment where issues can be resolved in real time, fostering a sense of trust and openness. Assertiveness is also a form of emotional resilience. It requires you to confront discomfort, both in yourself and in others. It's not always easy to express your needs or enforce your boundaries, especially when doing so might upset someone you care about. But this discomfort is temporary and the long-term benefits far outweigh it. Each time you assert yourself, you're building your capacity for honesty, courage, and self-respect. Some might fear that assertiveness will be perceived as selfish or demanding, but this is a misconception. True assertiveness is always tempered by empathy. It's not about bulldozing over others or insisting on your own way at all costs. It's about finding a balance between advocating for your own needs and respecting the needs of others. For example, in a disagreement with a man, an assertive approach might involve saying, I understand your perspective, but here's how I see it. Let's find a solution that works for both of us. This kind of communication is collaborative, not combative. In relationships with men, assertiveness is particularly important because it counters the tendency to fall into passive or overly accommodating roles. When you assert yourself, you're challenging the notion that your value lies in your willingness to comply or please. Instead, you're demonstrating that your thoughts, feelings, and desires matter just as much as anyone else's. This shifts the dynamic from one of imbalance to one of equality, creating a foundation for healthier, more fulfilling connections. Assertiveness is also a safeguard against manipulation. When you're clear about your boundaries and confident in expressing them, it becomes much harder for others to exploit or take advantage of you. You're less likely to be swayed by guilt-tripping, gaslighting, or other forms of emotional manipulation because you have a firm grasp on your own values and priorities. Assertiveness is not just about communication, it's about self-empowerment. It's a way of affirming your worth and refusing to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. It's a skill that benefits every area of your life, from your relationships to your career to your own mental health. And like any skill, it improves with practice. Each time you assert yourself, you're strengthening your voice and reinforcing the message that you are worthy of respect, both from others and from yourself. Empowerment begins with you. It's a process of taking ownership of your life, your choices, and your potential. Before you can build meaningful relationships, set boundaries, or demand accountability from others, you must first look inward and ask yourself a fundamental question: are you the person you want to be? Empowering yourself isn't just a personal pursuit, it's a necessity if you want to navigate your relationships, especially with men, from a place of strength and authenticity. Empowering yourself starts with self-awareness. It's about understanding who you are, what you value, and what you want from life. Too often, people drift through relationships without a clear sense of direction or purpose, hoping that the other person will somehow fill the gaps. But no one can complete you or define your worth. That responsibility lies solely with you. Self-awareness allows you to recognize your strengths and confront your weaknesses, creating a solid foundation for personal growth. One of the most empowering things you can do is to set clear goals for yourself. These goals don't have to be grand or life-altering, they just need to reflect your values and aspirations. For instance, you might decide to pursue a new skill, improve your health, or develop stronger emotional resilience. The act of setting and working toward these goals gives you a sense of purpose and control, reminding you that your life is yours to shape. It also shifts your focus inward, reducing the temptation to seek validation or direction from others. Empowerment also requires self-respect. This might seem obvious, but it's a concept that many people struggle with in practice. Self-respect means treating yourself with the same care, kindness, and dignity that you would extend to someone you deeply admire. It means recognizing your own worth even when others fail to. This is particularly important in relationships where it's all too easy to lose sight of your own needs in the effort to please someone else. A critical aspect of self-respect is learning to prioritize yourself without guilt. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or dismissive of others. It means acknowledging that your needs and well-being are just as important as anyone else's. When you empower yourself, you're giving yourself permission to say, I matter. My goals, my feelings, my boundaries, they all matter. This mindset is the key to building relationships that are rooted in mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. Empowering yourself also involves building emotional resilience. Life is unpredictable and relationships can be challenging, but your ability to navigate these difficulties depends largely on your inner strength. Emotional resilience is the capacity to face setbacks, disappointments, and conflicts without losing your sense of self. It's what allows you to stand firm in your values even when others challenge them, and to recover from emotional wounds without becoming bitter or jaded. Building emotional resilience requires practice and intention. One way to cultivate it is by reframing challenges as opportunities for growth. For example, if a relationship doesn't work out, instead of seeing it as a failure, you might ask yourself, what did I learn from this experience? How can I use this knowledge to make better choices in the future? This shift in perspective helps you view life's difficulties as stepping stones rather than roadblocks. Empowerment also comes from taking responsibility for your own happiness. This doesn't mean you can't rely on others for support, but it does mean recognizing that your happiness isn't anyone else's responsibility. When you place the burden of your well-being on someone else, you're giving them power over you, power they didn't ask for and may not know how to handle. By taking ownership of your happiness, you reclaim that power and free yourself from the expectations and disappointments that come with external reliance. Another key component of empowerment is self-care. This goes beyond the surface-level idea of treating yourself to occasional indulgences. It's about consistently meeting your physical, emotional, and mental needs. Self-care might mean setting aside time for hobbies, seeking therapy to address unresolved issues, or simply ensuring you get enough rest. When you care for yourself, you're sending a message to yourself and others: I am worth the effort. Confidence is another crucial element of empowerment. Confidence doesn't mean being perfect or never doubting yourself. It means trusting your ability to handle whatever comes your way. Confidence grows when you step outside your comfort zone and take risks, even when the outcome is uncertain. It's built through experience and perseverance, and it's reinforced every time you face a challenge and come out stronger on the other side. Empowering yourself also means surrounding yourself with the right people. The company you keep has a profound impact on your mindset and self-perception. Seek out relationships that uplift and inspire you, and distance yourself from those that drain your energy or undermine your confidence. Empowerment isn't just about what you do for yourself, it's also about the environment you create for your growth. Empowering yourself is about reclaiming your agency. It's about realizing that you are not a passive participant in your own life, you are the architect of it. It's a commitment to yourself, a promise that you will strive to be the best version of who you are, not for anyone else's approval, but because you owe it to yourself. Empowerment doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey of self-discovery and self-improvement that continues throughout your life. In conclusion, true relationships thrive not on blind niceness but on mutual respect, accountability, and empowerment. Being nice without boundaries often leads to imbalance and resentment, undermining your worth and the relationship's integrity. Instead, cultivate strength in assertiveness, demand accountability, and prioritize your growth. Empower yourself first, because only from a place of self-respect can you foster meaningful connections. By shifting from people-pleasing to authentic, value-driven interactions, you not only command respect but also inspire the men in your life to grow alongside you. Choose strength over submission, respect over validation, and empowerment over appeasement. This is the path to true fulfillment.